Hi. Today I'm going to show you the first scale that I learned to improvise with on the guitar. This is the pentatonic scale. Both the major and the minor pentatonic scale, they're built into one scale. But when my guitar teacher first showed me this scale when I was a kid, I would just use it all the time. For several years after that, if I was taking a guitar solo, I would almost always just go to this one particular shape. So it's a really useful one and used by a lot of people frequently. So this the scale I'm going to show you here, let's do it in the key of A. So it'll be A minor pentatonic scale. So to do that, we're going to start on the 5th fret of the 6th string on the A. If we wanted to play a G minor pentatonic scale, you just have to slide this shape down to G at the 3rd fret, or if you want to play B, you just start at the 7th fret. But we're going to play A. So A minor pentatonic scale. It's the 5th fret, 8th fret, and then on the next string it's 5, 7, and then 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 8, 5, 8. So one more time, that's 5, 8, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 8, 5, 8. And going back down. So this scale you can use for a lot of different kinds of things. So if we're in the key of A minor, if you hear a lot of A minor chords, a lot of A minors, maybe a lot of D minors, a lot of E minor or E major or E7, hear a lot of those kinds of chords. If you keep going back to that A minor, you're probably in the key of A minor. So you can do little minor things like that with it. You can also play it if you're in the key of A major, if you want it to sound bluesy. So if we've got, like, say we've got A, D, and E, and we're playing some kind of rock or blues thing, say something like this. Those notes are going to work over this. It'll sound like this. So the notes I'm playing in that scale, they're minor notes. We're hearing like some minor thirds and other notes that make this sound minor. And but the chords here that I was playing along with that were major chords. Now that clash between major and minor is a big part of what gives us the sound of the blues. So if you want to play something bluesy, you can mix those two things together like that. And what I just did is very, very frequently used in rock music and other music that was influenced by the blues. So a few licks that are good to look at in this. It's good to bend some notes when you're playing this scale. If you bend the 8th fret of the 1st string, just push it up a little bit. That's a good note to bend. And 8th fret of the 2nd string, that's a good one. A lot of vibrato is nice when you're doing this kind of thing. 7th fret on the 3rd string. I bend that note a lot too. 5th fret of the 3rd string. Anyway, it's good to just play around with those bends. And when you're playing anything here, it's good to go back to the tonic. It's good to go back to the main note of the scale. So if we're in A minor here like this, well, I better get to that. Let's pause for a second and I'll continue in a moment. Hi again. So so the minor pentatonic scale, that's what I just showed you here, and showed you some of these bends, and it's good to know where the A's are so you can resolve to them. So the 5th fret of the 6th string, 7th fret of the 4th string, 5th fret of the 1st string. So if you're ever in doubt about where to land, keep going back to that note, it'll sound nice. It'll resolve if you go to that. It'll sound like you're finishing a phrase in the right way. Doesn't mean you always have to go there, but if you don't know where to go, that's a good place to go. So some good licks to use within this scale. Some nice Chuck Berry things you can do. That thing, if you bend the 7th fret of the 3rd string, push it up like that, and then go to the 5th fret of the 2nd string. One of those classic Chuck Berry licks. You can do the same kind of thing starting on the 8th fret of the 2nd string, going to the 5th fret of the 1st string. And as you do that, you should try to mute some of those extra strings. When I do this, my 3rd finger kind of touches the 3rd string, just to block it a little bit. And sometimes I mute with my right hand as well, just kind of block some of those strings so you don't hear any extra strings ringing out. But those are some good licks to know. It's good to throw in lots of hammer-ons and pull-offs like that. Some slides. It's good to shift out of that position for a moment. Use your 3rd finger here on the 5th fret, and then come back to the 7th fret. You can do that there. You can do it here on the 4th string. So those are some nice things there. So just play around with that, noodle around with that scale a whole bunch. There's another good one. You can bend the 8th fret of the 2nd string and play the 1st string at the 5th fret at the same time. When I do these bends, I back up the note I'm bending with another finger here usually. So my 3rd finger is actually bending the note, but my 2nd finger is helping with push the string a little bit. That can make it a little bit easier. But yeah, I'd recommend just noodling around with that scale a lot, and if you just make a recording of yourself playing an A minor chord, that might be a good way to start, just A minor for a while and just play over it. Or if you want to make it more interesting, you could go back and forth between A minor and G, or A minor and E. Or you can do a 12-bar blues. You could do yeah, play around with that scale a little bit while I do this. Yeah, and try some of those bends. Yeah, that sounds good. One more time. So just play around with that, see what you can come up with, and I recommend whenever you learn a new scale to just play it for a really long time and just get so you know it really well. I've had a lot of students who've come to me and wanted to learn a whole bunch of scales at once, and I don't think that's really the best way to learn to improvise well. I think it's better to just take one scale when you first start at least and just practice that a lot and really get so you know it inside and out, and then learn another scale. So anyway, I was telling you this scale is more than one scale. So if we think of this note that we were starting on as the main note, it's A minor pentatonic scale. But if we think of the note we're playing with the little finger here on the 6th string, that C, suddenly the scale is C major pentatonic scale. It has a very different sound. You can make it sound like C is the main note or A is the main note just by landing on that C or that A a lot. The C's are 8th fret of the 1st string, 5th fret of the 3rd string, 8th fret of the 6th string. So if you keep going back to that, it sounds like C. But if you go back to those A's, keep going back to that, it sounds more like A minor. So you can make it one or the other just by going back to that note. But more often, than the note defining it, the chords are going to define the scale, the key you're in, I think. So when if you're playing those scales and the main chord is C, it's going to sound like C major. Like if I do this. So that was a C major kind of thing, but it was more the chords that were dictating that fact. Anyway, that scale is a very widely used scale. It's one of the major pentatonic scale, or pentatonic scales in general, are one of the more universal things in music. You hear music from all around the world that's based on pentatonic scales. Pentatonic, that just means 5 notes, comes from the Greek for 5 notes. But if you listen to folk music from Asia or Africa or Europe or North or South America, anywhere around the world, you hear these pentatonic scales coming up. I haven't heard any music from Antarctica, but I would guess that if they have some folk music there, that it probably uses the pentatonic scale. Probably Australia too. Haven't really thought about the pentatonic scale in Australia, but they probably use it over there too. Anyway. There's a really good video of Bobby McFerrin talking about the pentatonic scale. I recommend watching that after this video. Just Google Bobby McFerrin pentatonic scale, and he'll kind of demonstrate how ingrained it is in our brains. There are the scale's been around for a really long time. They found flutes that I believe are about 20,000 years old that are tuned to the pentatonic scale, and you can play a lot of the same kinds of melodies that we like today using these flutes. Little things like that. A lot of little bits of music are pentatonic. Even if a whole song isn't pentatonic, there will often be parts of a song that are just pentatonic. Anyway, let's see. If you just play the black keys on a piano, that's the pentatonic scale. That's F sharp, major pentatonic. If you take the pentatonic scale and start on the C and just go up the scale, you have the riff for My Girl. You can take this pentatonic scale and the major one and do a lot of double stops, things like that. Then you can play little Hendrixy things. He does a lot of that kind of thing. He's often going into a slightly different shape from that one, but playing things like that sounds to me like Jimi Hendrix. It's not something he might do. What else should I show you with this scale? It's often used to evoke nature by composers. You hear in classical music when they want something that sounds like a brook or a meadow or a forest or the natural world, they'll often use the pentatonic scale. The Rhine maiden, who they guard the gold in Wagner's ring cycle, and they live in the Rhine. They've got a leitmotif that's based on the pentatonic scale. That's just one example. Anyway, learn that scale and just try putting it into everything. If you're in C major, try using the C major pentatonic scale. If you're in A minor, try using the A minor pentatonic scale, and yeah, just try moving it around and playing it in different keys. And try doing that thing I was saying before, where you play the minor pentatonic scale over the major chords, because that comes up a lot in rock music and in other blues influenced music. But yeah, just noodle around with these scales a lot. I'm sure I'm forgetting some important things to say, but I'll say those in a future video. I'll play a few more chords and you noodle around a little more with that scale, and then we'll finish up here. 2, 3, 4. Play me some of those bends. One more time. Alright, that sounds good. So play around with that scale and get so you know it really well. Have a good one.